Jasmine had always known that moving to a new school would be hard, but she had not imagined it would be like this. The moment she walked through the tall gray doors of Jefferson High, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her. She tried to hold her head high, taking slow, steady steps as she made her way to the office to get her schedule. Her backpack felt heavier than it really was, almost as if it carried all the nervous energy inside her. She was the new girl, and everyone could tell. The halls smelled of polished floors and cafeteria food. Lockers clanged shut, students laughed loudly, and somewhere a bell rang sharply. Jasmine clutched her schedule in one hand, trying to memorize the names of the classrooms. She knew that getting lost would only make her look even more out of place. She had moved from another city, and everything here seemed bigger, louder, and colder. Her first class was English, and she hoped it would be easy to slip into a seat unnoticed. She walked in quietly, scanning the room. Most seats were already taken, but she spotted one in the back corner. It wasn't the best spot, but it would do. She slid the chair out and sat down, feeling a little relieved to have a small space she could call her own. She tried to focus on the teacher's introduction, but it was hard. She could feel eyes on her, and every whisper made her heart pound faster. It didn't take long for the trouble to start. A group of students sitting a few rows ahead began to giggle and point in her direction. Jasmine tried to ignore them, keeping her eyes on the notebook in front of her. She didn't understand why they were looking at her that way. She had done nothing to draw attention, but somehow attention found her. During the first break, she headed to the water fountain, hoping for a quiet moment. That was when one of the girls from the group approached her. She had a sharp voice and an expression that made Jasmine's stomach twist. "Hey, new girl," she said, leaning closer than necessary. "You really think you can fit in here?" Jasmine looked up and shook her head slightly, murmuring a polite, "I'm just trying to get through the day." The girl laughed, a loud, sharp sound that drew the attention of a few nearby students. "Just trying? That's cute. You don't even know how things work here." She nudged Jasmine's shoulder, and Jasmine stepped back instinctively. She didn't want to make a scene, but her heart raced. She wished she could disappear, wished the floor would swallow her whole. The girl smirked and walked away, but the damage was done. Jasmine felt small, like she had been marked before she had even had a chance to make a friend. She spent the rest of the day navigating the crowded hallways with care. Every glance felt like it carried judgment. Every laugh seemed aimed at her. She tried to focus on her classes, on the lessons and the notes, but it was impossible to block out the feeling of being watched, of being an outsider. The lunchroom was no relief either. She carried her tray, scanning for a place to sit. Most tables were full, and the ones that had space were filled with groups of students who looked like they had known each other forever. Finally, she found an empty spot at the edge of the room. She sat down quietly, trying to make herself invisible. It didn't work. Almost immediately, the same group found her. They sat across from her, leaning in close, their presence looming. One of the boys laughed and knocked her tray slightly, causing some of her food to slide. "Oops," he said with a smirk. "Clumsy, huh?" Jasmine's face flushed, but she said nothing. She pushed her tray back and tried to eat quickly, hoping they would get bored and leave. But they didn't. They whispered and giggled, casting sideways glances and making comments that were just loud enough for her to hear. Every word cut a little deeper. She felt trapped, like there was no way out of their attention. The day dragged on, each class feeling longer than the last. Every time she tried to focus on the lesson, she could hear their laughter in the back of her mind. Every time she turned a corner, she worried they would be there. When the final bell rang, she felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that the day was over, dread because she knew it would start all over again tomorrow. Walking home, she kept her backpack straps tight on her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the sidewalk. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the empty streets. She took deep breaths, trying to shake off the tension that had built up all day. Her neighborhood was quiet, safe, but it did little to calm her racing thoughts. She thought about what she had experienced and felt a lump form in her throat. She hated feeling powerless, hated feeling like she didn't belong. At home, her mother noticed immediately that something was wrong. Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, poking at her food without much appetite. Her mother sat across from her, concern etched in every line of her face. "How was your first day?" she asked gently. Jasmine shrugged, not wanting to relive the day, but finally, after a long silence, she began to speak. She told her mother about the hallway stairs, The whispers, the pushing, and the lunchroom humiliation. Her mother listened quietly, nodding, letting Jasmine speak without interruption. When she finished, her mother reached across the table and held her hand. "I know it's hard right now," she said. "But remember, you are strong. You have your skills, and you have your heart. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Jasmine nodded, taking comfort in her mother's words, though she couldn't shake the unease entirely. That night, she went to her room and sat quietly, thinking. She thought about how everyone at school assumed she was weak, assumed she would just take their teasing without fight. They didn't know her. They didn't know what she could do, what she had trained for, what she had achieved. She had been practicing karate since she was young, earning her black belt through years of discipline, focus, and perseverance. She had learned to control her strength, to remain calm under pressure, to defend herself, but she had never needed to use it outside of practice before. She thought about the days to come and realized that she couldn't hide forever. She would have to face the bullies, but she would do it on her own terms. She would stay calm, stay confident, and if needed, she could show them exactly who they were dealing with. But for now, she focused on one thing: surviving the day and learning the rhythm of this new school. Understanding its rules, its social dynamics, its hidden currents. She had moved many times in her life, and she had always adapted, always found her footing. This would be no different. The next morning, Jasmine dressed carefully, choosing her outfit with thought, wanting to feel comfortable in her own skin. She took deep breaths before walking out the door, ready to face the hallways again. She reminded herself that she didn't need anyone's approval, that she didn't need to shrink herself to fit in. The bullies might try to intimidate her, but she had her skills, her discipline, and her courage. That was more than enough. As she stepped onto the school grounds, she noticed the familiar group waiting by the lockers. They saw her too, and their laughter started immediately. But Jasmine didn't falter. She held her head high, walked straight, and didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. She kept her gaze forward, her steps steady. She had survived the first day, and she could survive the second. And one day they would realize that underestimating her had been the biggest mistake of their lives. Throughout the day, she observed, learned the layout, the timing, the patterns of the students around her. She began to feel a little more in control, a little more confident. She still kept her head down in class, still avoided unnecessary attention, but there was a new sense of determination in her movements, a quiet strength in her demeanor. She knew that she was more than what anyone thought of her at first glance, and though the bullies might continue their attempts to intimidate, Jasmine was ready. She had survived the first real challenge at Jefferson High, and she was preparing herself for what would come next. Jasmine had managed to get through the first day, but the second day felt even heavier. She knew the group of students would be watching her, waiting for her to slip up. She moved through the hallways with careful steps, trying to ignore the whispers and glances, but it was impossible to completely shut them out. The laughter followed her like a shadow, growing louder in the quiet moments when she least expected it. During her first class, she took a seat at the same back corner desk she had chosen the day before. She opened her notebook and tried to focus on the teacher's words, but the voices in her mind kept drifting back to the hallway confrontations and the cafeteria incident. It felt like a heavy weight on her chest, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. Every few minutes, she felt the eyes of the students on her, their stares sharp and unkind. At break, she went to the library hoping for some peace. It was quiet there, with only a few students scattered at tables. Jasmine sat down at an empty table near the window and tried to focus on reading a book she had brought. She liked stories about people overcoming challenges, and the words on the page helped her escape for a little while, but she could not escape completely. The same group found her again. They leaned over the table, whispering to each other and casting glances at her. Jasmine kept her head down, pretending to be absorbed in her book. "You think you can hide here?" one of the girls said, tapping her pencil against the table. Jasmine ignored her, hoping that if she didn't respond, they would lose interest. But the girl only smirked wider. "What's the matter? Don't like attention?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. Jasmine closed her book slowly, looking up at the ceiling instead of meeting her eyes. She wanted to respond, to tell them to leave her alone, but she remembered her mother's words, "Stay calm, stay strong." The bell rang, and Jasmine moved to her next class. She walked through the crowded hallway, the group following her like a shadow. A boy bumped into her shoulder on purpose, making her stumble slightly. "Watch where you're going," he said with a sneer. Jasmine caught her balance quickly, not letting him see how startled she was. She kept walking, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack, her mind focused on surviving the day. In math class, Jasmine tried to concentrate on the equations on the board. Numbers and formulas were supposed to be a safe space, something she could lose herself in. But even there, she felt the whispers and giggles at the back of the room. It was exhausting. Every day, every hour seemed to demand more energy than she had to give. She longed for someone to notice, to stand up for her, but she had learned not to expect help from others. Lunchtime came, and with it the same fear. Jasmine carried her tray carefully, scanning the cafeteria for an empty seat. She spotted one at the end of a table, hoping it would be far enough from the bullies. As she sat down, she felt the familiar eyes on her. A few students at the other end of the room snickered, making faces and whispering to each other. Jasmine tried to focus on her food, on the taste of it, but her appetite was gone. She felt tense, every muscle in her body coiled, ready for the next encounter. The bullies weren't done. One of them approached her table and leaned down. "You're really trying to act normal, huh?" "That's funny," she said. She reached out and flicked Jasmine's hair back over her shoulder. Jasmine flinched but stayed silent, pushing her plate slightly away. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. But the whispers and laughter didn't stop. They seemed to follow her wherever she went, a constant reminder that she was different and, in their eyes, weak. The day continued, each class bringing new challenges. In science, the group tried to trip her as she walked past their desks. In history, they whispered jokes every time the teacher looked away. Jasmine felt like she was under a microscope, every movement watched and judged. It was exhausting, but she forced herself to stay calm. She knew losing her temper or showing fear would only make things worse. She had learned to control her emotions through karate, to stay focused even when provoked. That discipline kept her grounded even in the chaos. After school, Jasmine dreaded walking home. She thought about taking a longer route to avoid the group, but that would mean more time on her feet, more exposure to the same eyes. She chose the shortest path, moving quickly but carefully. Sure enough, the bullies appeared ahead, leaning against a wall and laughing. One of them stepped forward, blocking her path. "Going somewhere, new girl?" he asked. Jasmine looked at him calmly, assessing the situation. She didn't show fear, but she didn't make a move yet either. She knew that control was her greatest weapon. "I'm just heading home," she said softly, keeping her voice steady. The boy stepped closer, trying to intimidate her. Jasmine noticed the shift in his stance, the way he was trying to make himself seem bigger. But she didn't flinch. She remembered the countless hours she had spent in the dojo, learning to stay calm, to read the intentions of others. She took a deep breath and prepared herself, ready for whatever they might do next. The boy laughed and the others joined in. They tried to push her gently, testing her reaction. Jasmine held her ground, shifting her weight slightly, maintaining her balance. She didn't strike. She didn't shout, but her calm presence seemed to confuse them. They expected fear, weakness, but all they found was stillness and quiet confidence. After a moment, they backed off slightly, not sure what to do. Jasmine continued walking, her steps steady, until she was safely past them. At home, she finally allowed herself to relax. She took off her shoes, hung her backpack, and sank into the chair at her desk. The events of the day replayed in her mind. She thought about how the bullies had underestimated her, how they had assumed she would break. She smiled faintly, realizing that she had passed their test in her own way. She hadn't shown anger. She hadn't given them the reaction they wanted. She had controlled herself, and that control was powerful. Her mother came in with a snack, noticing the thoughtful expression on Jasmine's face. "Rough day?" she asked. Jasmine nodded, recounting some of the incidents. Her mother listened carefully, offering comfort and advice. "Remember, you don't have to fight them with anger," she said. "You have your own strength, and sometimes the best response is to show that you are not afraid. You are stronger than they think." Jasmine nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. She knew the days ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she had the skills and the mindset to face them. That night, Jasmine reflected on her journey in karate. She thought about the discipline, the focus, and the hours of practice that had brought her to this point. She realized that those skills were not just physical, they were mental, emotional. They had taught her patience, control, and confidence. She understood that being strong didn't always mean fighting back with fists. Sometimes it meant standing firm, staying calm, and letting the other person's assumptions fail them. The next morning, Jasmine walked into Jefferson High with her head held high. She was aware of the group waiting for her, ready to test her again, but she didn't hesitate. She moved through the halls with purpose, observing, learning, and preparing. Every interaction, every glance, every whisper was an opportunity to practice her calm, her control, and her courage. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to understand how to navigate this new world, how to maintain her dignity and strength even when others tried to take it away. She knew the days ahead would be challenging. The bullies would continue their attempts to intimidate her. But Jasmine was no longer just the quiet new girl. She was a black belt in karate, disciplined, focused, and ready. She understood her own power, and she knew that one day she would not just survive Jefferson High. She would command respect, quietly but firmly, on her own terms. And that knowledge gave her a sense of calm, a sense of purpose, and a growing confidence that no whisper or laugh could shake. Jasmine had learned to navigate Jefferson High with quiet precision. Each day she observed, planned, and adjusted, understanding the rhythm of the students around her. But the group of bullies was relentless. They seemed to take pleasure in testing her, in finding new ways to embarrass her. And Jasmine knew that sooner or later the situation would come to a head. She could feel it in the tension of the hallways, in the way their eyes followed her, in the smirks that never quite left their faces. One morning, as she walked into the building, she noticed the group waiting near the lockers, their laughter ringing out across the hall. Jasmine held her backpack tightly, her steps steady. She knew that whatever they had planned, she had to remain calm. She had survived their teasing and their tests before, and she could do it again. She reminded herself that she didn't need to react with anger or fear. Her strength was in her control, in her ability to remain composed even when provoked. As she moved down the hallway, one of the girls stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You think you can just walk through here like you belong?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jasmine paused for a moment, studying her. The girl was trying to intimidate her, but Jasmine stayed still, keeping her expression neutral. She didn't respond with words. She didn't need to. Her presence alone spoke volumes. She had learned through karate that control and confidence often spoke louder than any shout or retort. The girl reached out to push her, but Jasmine shifted slightly, avoiding the contact with ease. The other students around them began to gather, sensing the tension. They whispered and exchanged glances, curious to see what would happen next. Jasmine's heart beat steadily, not with fear but with focus. She was aware of every movement, every gesture, every subtle shift in balance. Her mind was clear, her body ready. She wasn't going to let them corner her, but she also wasn't going to escalate the situation unnecessarily. "Why are you even here?" the girl demanded. "No one wants you here." Jasmine didn't respond verbally. She simply stepped around her, continuing on her path to class. The girl laughed, clearly frustrated that Jasmine didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Jasmine felt a small surge of satisfaction, but she didn't let it show. She knew that the true test was not just in this moment, but in how she handled the ongoing challenge of these students trying to provoke her. During lunch, Jasmine found a spot at the edge of the cafeteria, away from the main crowd. She opened her lunch quietly, trying to focus on her food, but she could hear the whispers and laughter from across the room. The bullies had followed her as expected. They leaned against the table nearby, whispering and glancing at her with amusement. Jasmine took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm. She had trained for moments like this, and she could handle it. Her black belt wasn't just a symbol of physical ability. It represented years of discipline, focus, and mental strength. Suddenly, one of the girls reached across the table and knocked over Jasmine's drink. It spilled across her tray and onto her notebook. Jasmine's first instinct was to remain calm, to not react with anger. She pushed the tray away, standing up slowly, her eyes meeting the girls without fear. The cafeteria grew quiet, students pausing to watch the unfolding scene. Jasmine's calmness contrasted sharply with the girl's aggression. The tension in the room was palpable. "What's the matter? Don't like a little mess?" the girl sneered. Jasmine didn't answer. She simply bent down to clean the spill, her movements deliberate and controlled. The girl laughed, clearly trying to provoke her further. But Jasmine's demeanor didn't change. She was in control of herself, and that control unsettled the bullies. They had expected a reaction, a display of fear or anger, and instead they found composure and quiet confidence. After lunch, Jasmine walked to her next class, her mind still focused and alert. She knew that the bullies would try something again, and she was ready. In the hallway, one of the boys stepped out from behind a locker, blocking her path. "Going somewhere, new girl?" he asked, a smirk on his face. Jasmine stopped, facing him calmly. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. She simply looked at him, steady and unyielding. The boy reached out to grab her arm, but Jasmine shifted her weight, moving smoothly and avoiding contact. Her movements were precise and controlled, honed through years of karate training. The boy stumbled slightly, surprised by her agility. The surrounding students gasped, some whispering to each other about what they had just seen. Jasmine continued walking, her steps measured, her focus unwavering. She had defended herself without aggression, without escalating the situation, and it had worked. By the end of the day, Jasmine knew that the bullies were becoming frustrated. They had tested her repeatedly, and each time she had remained calm and composed. They were beginning to realize that she was not an easy target, that their usual tactics of intimidation were ineffective. Jasmine felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that her discipline and control were her greatest strengths. That evening, Jasmine reflected on the events of the day. She thought about how she had handled each encounter, how she had remained calm under pressure. She realized that her training in karate was not just about physical skill. It was about mental resilience, emotional control, and confidence. She had faced challenges before, and she knew that this was just another step in her journey. The bullies had tested her, but she had proven to herself that she could remain strong and composed no matter what they did. The next morning, Jasmine entered Jefferson High with renewed determination. She knew the bullies would continue their attempts to provoke her, but she was prepared. She moved through the hallways with purpose, her eyes focused, her steps steady. Every glance, every whisper, every laugh was an opportunity to practice her calm and her confidence. She was no longer just the quiet new girl. She was someone who understood her own strength and was ready to face any challenge. During class, Jasmine paid close attention to her surroundings. She noticed the patterns of the students, the way they moved, the timing of their interactions. She observed the bullies, understanding their tactics, anticipating their moves. She realized that she could navigate the school not just with avoidance, but with awareness and strategy. Her black belt training had taught her to read situations, to assess threats, and to respond with precision. She applied those lessons to her daily life, becoming more confident and composed with each passing hour. In the cafeteria, Jasmine found a table away from the main crowd. She opened her lunch quietly, focusing on her food and her own thoughts. The bullies approached as expected, trying to draw her into their game. But Jasmine remained calm, her demeanor steady. She didn't react to their taunts or their attempts to embarrass her. Instead, she focused on her own space, her own composure. The bullies, frustrated by her lack of reaction, eventually moved away, leaving her in peace. Jasmine felt a sense of victory, not because she had fought back with aggression, but because she had maintained control and confidence. After school, Jasmine walked home, reflecting on the day. She thought about how she had handled each encounter, how she had remained calm and composed under pressure. She realized that her strength was not just in her physical abilities, but in her mental resilience and emotional control. She had faced challenges before, and she knew that she could handle whatever came next. The bullies had tested her, but she had proven to herself that she was strong, capable, and confident. That night, Jasmine sat quietly in her room, thinking about the days ahead. She knew that the bullies would continue to test her, but she also knew that she had the skills, discipline, and confidence to face them. She reflected on her karate training, the lessons she had learned, and the strength she had developed over the years. She realized that she was not just surviving Jefferson High. She was learning to navigate it with strategy, awareness, and confidence. The next morning, Jasmine walked into school with her head held high. She was aware of the bullies waiting for her, ready to test her again, but she didn't hesitate. She moved through the hallways with purpose, observing, learning, and preparing. Every interaction, every glance, every whisper was an opportunity to practice her calm, her control, and her courage. She was no longer just the quiet new girl. She was a force to be reckoned with, quietly commanding respect through her composure and confidence. Throughout the week, Jasmine continued to face the bullies, each encounter strengthening her resolve. She remained calm, composed and aware, using her mental and emotional strength to navigate each challenge. She realized that her training had prepared her not just for physical confrontations, but for the daily battles of confidence, respect, and resilience. She had learned to stand her ground, to maintain her dignity, and to respond to challenges with strategy and control. By the end of the week, Jasmine felt a growing sense of empowerment. The bullies were beginning to understand that she was not an easy target, that their usual tactics of intimidation were ineffective. Jasmine had proven to herself that she could remain strong and composed, no matter what challenges came her way. She had faced adversity with grace and strength, and she knew that she was capable of handling whatever Jefferson High had in store for her next. Jasmine had spent weeks navigating Jefferson High with careful attention and quiet confidence. She had learned to read the hallways, to anticipate the movements of students, and to maintain her composure under pressure. Yet, despite her skill and awareness, the bullies continued their attempts to provoke her. They tested her patience in subtle ways, from whispered comments in the classroom to deliberate bumps in the hallway. Jasmine had faced each challenge calmly, but she knew it was only a matter of time before a confrontation escalated beyond words. One afternoon, as the school day was winding down, the group of bullies decided to corner her in the gymnasium. The gym was empty except for a few students finishing up sports practice. Jasmine had just finished her own activity, and she was walking toward the exit when the bullies blocked her path. They surrounded her, their smirks confident, their laughter echoing off the walls. "Looks like the new girl is all alone," one of the boys said, stepping closer. "Where do you think you're going?" Jasmine stood still, her eyes calm and focused. She didn't flinch, didn't back away, and didn't speak. The group leaned in, trying to intimidate her, but Jasmine's quiet confidence made them pause. She had learned to control her body, her movements, and her emotions. Her presence alone had a weight that made them second-guess their approach. One of the girls tried to push her, laughing as she did. Jasmine shifted slightly, avoiding the contact with precision. The other students gasped at the fluidity and ease with which she moved. Jasmine's movements were controlled, practiced, and deliberate. She was ready, not just to defend herself physically if needed, but to assert her strength in a way that demanded respect. "You think you can just ignore us?" another girl asked, her voice dripping with mockery. Jasmine took a deep breath, remaining calm. She could feel her training guiding her, the discipline and focus honed over years of karate practice. She didn't need to shout or strike to show strength. She only needed to remain in control, letting the bullies' own assumptions work against them. Suddenly, one of the boys lunged forward, intending to push her to the floor. Jasmine stepped to the side smoothly, using his momentum to shift him off balance without striking him. The other students stepped back, startled by her agility and control. Jasmine's movements were precise and measured, demonstrating both skill and restraint. The gym grew silent, the only sound the distant echo of sneakers on the polished floor. The bullies stared at her, realizing that they had underestimated her. For the first time, the confidence in their eyes wavered. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her calm, controlled presence, combined with the subtle display of skill, conveyed a message far stronger than words could. She was not someone to be taken lightly. A teacher happened to walk into the gym, noticing the tension in the group of students surrounding Jasmine. "What's going on here?" the teacher asked, voice firm. The bullies quickly dispersed, mumbling excuses, but Jasmine remained composed. She knew she hadn't acted out of anger, but out of control and self-respect. The teacher glanced at her, noting her calm demeanor, and nodded in understanding. Jasmine felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had handled the situation without resorting to aggression, yet still asserted her strength. Word of the incident spread quickly through the school. Students who had witnessed it whispered among themselves, curious about the quiet new girl who had effortlessly avoided being pushed around. Teachers and staff began to take notice, and the reputation Jasmine had quietly built for herself started to shift. No longer was she seen as just the timid new student. She was becoming known as someone who carried herself with confidence, skill, and calm authority. The bullies themselves were unsettled. They had thought that teasing and intimidation would be enough to break her spirit, but they had been proven wrong. They began to realize that Jasmine was not only physically capable, but also mentally and emotionally strong. Their usual tactics of provocation were ineffective, and they had no idea how to respond to someone who refused to be rattled by their attempts. Over the next few days, Jasmine continued to navigate school with quiet focus. She walked the hallways with her head held high, fully aware of the shifting perception around her. Students who had previously ignored her began to notice her, some with curiosity, others with newfound respect. Teachers too recognized the poise and maturity she exhibited. Jasmine felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't experienced before, a recognition that her strength went beyond physical skill. It was in her discipline, her control, and her unwavering composure. The bullies, frustrated by their inability to provoke her, became more cautious. They no longer approached her with the same confidence, and their whispers and glances became more tentative. Jasmine observed their behavior with quiet awareness, understanding that her presence alone now commanded attention and respect. She didn't need to assert dominance aggressively. Her calm strength spoke for itself. One afternoon, during a group project in class, a few students approached her, asking for her help and advice. They had heard about her skills and confidence, and they were curious to learn more about her. Jasmine smiled softly, offering guidance and support without arrogance. She realized that her experiences with the bullies had not only strengthened her own resolve, but had also created opportunities to connect with others and demonstrate leadership. At home, Jasmine reflected on the past weeks. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the moments of tension, and the way she had responded with calm and precision. She understood that her black belt was more than a symbol of physical ability. It represented discipline, focus, and the strength to navigate difficult situations with grace. She felt proud of herself, not for overpowering the bullies, but for maintaining control and confidence under pressure. Her mother noticed the change in Jasmine. She saw the quiet confidence in her daughter's eyes, the way she carried herself with poise and strength. "You've grown so much," her mother said one evening, sitting beside her. "I'm proud of how you've handled everything at school. You've shown strength not just in skill, but in heart and mind." Jasmine smiled, feeling a sense of validation. She knew that the journey wasn't over, but she had reached a turning point. She had faced the bullies, maintained her composure, and earned respect in a way that was uniquely her own. The following week, the bullies approached her again, this time with more hesitation. They were aware now that their usual tactics were ineffective. Jasmine met their glances calmly, not with aggression, but with quiet confidence. She didn't need to prove herself through confrontation. Her presence alone conveyed her strength and resilience. The group eventually backed down, realizing that they could not intimidate her, and that their previous assumptions about her had been completely wrong. With the bullies' behavior changing, Jasmine noticed a shift in the school environment around her. Other students began to treat her with respect, some even seeking her out for friendship and guidance. She realized that by maintaining her composure and demonstrating her strength through calm confidence, she had created a space where she could thrive and influence others positively. She became a quiet role model, showing that strength was not about aggression, but about self-control, discipline, and courage. Jasmine continued her training in karate, understanding that the lessons she had learned on the mat were applicable to all areas of her life. She practiced focus, patience, and awareness, knowing that these skills would help her navigate both challenges and opportunities. She realized that true strength was not just physical. It was the ability to remain composed under pressure, to make thoughtful decisions, and to act with integrity. By the end of the month, Jasmine's reputation at Jefferson High had transformed. She was no longer seen as the timid new girl, but as someone with quiet strength and resilience. The bullies had learned to respect her boundaries, and other students had come to admire her confidence and composure. Jasmine had not only defended herself, but had also created a sense of empowerment for herself and those around her. As she walked through the hallways, Jasmine felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced adversity, navigated challenges with grace, and emerged stronger and more confident. She understood that her journey was ongoing, but she also knew that she had the skills, discipline, and resilience to face whatever came next. Her black belt was not just a symbol of physical ability. It was a testament to her inner strength, her determination, and her unwavering courage. Jasmine's story at Jefferson High was no longer just about surviving the bullies. It was about transformation, growth, and empowerment. She had turned fear into confidence, weakness into strength, and adversity into an opportunity to demonstrate her true capabilities. And in doing so, she had shown everyone around her that true strength comes from within, from the ability to remain calm, focused, and composed in the face of challenges. Jasmine had spent weeks at Jefferson High facing challenges, bullies, and the constant pressure of being the new girl. Yet she had remained calm, confident, and composed. Now, as the school year progressed, the dynamics were shifting. Students were beginning to see her as someone who could handle herself, someone whose presence carried quiet authority. The bullies, who had once ruled the hallways with confidence, were now cautious, their usual arrogance tempered by the knowledge that Jasmine could stand her ground. One afternoon, after school, Jasmine found herself walking toward the gym for her karate practice. She enjoyed the quiet of the empty halls, the way the sound of her steps echoed off the walls. She had grown used to moving with awareness, observing the environment and predicting potential challenges. It had become a natural part of her day. As she rounded the corner, she noticed the group of bullies waiting near the lockers. Their expressions were cautious, not the usual smirks of confidence. They had learned that Jasmine was not someone to provoke easily. "Hey," one of the girls said tentatively, taking a small step forward. Jasmine stopped and looked at them calmly. She didn't raise her voice or display aggression. Her black belt had taught her that strength came from control, not force. We wanted to talk," the girl continued. Jasmine listened silently, her posture relaxed but firm, giving her full attention without showing fear or impatience. The boy who had been the most aggressive earlier stepped forward, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, we didn't mean to push things so far. We were wrong," he said. Jasmine's expression remained calm. She had expected some acknowledgement, but she also knew the importance of letting the conversation flow naturally without judgment. She nodded slightly, signaling that she was listening. The girl continued, "We just didn't understand. We thought you were different. We didn't know who you really were, but now we see that you're strong. Really strong, and not just in karate. You're brave." Jasmine felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. It was not about hearing apologies or getting recognition. It was about seeing a change in their attitude. The bullies were beginning to understand respect, learning that actions and assumptions had consequences. Jasmine spoke softly, her voice steady. "I never wanted to fight you. I just wanted to be treated fairly. I wanted to be respected for who I am, not for who people think I am." The students looked at her, taking in her words. Her calm demeanor, her clear eyes, and her composed posture made an impact. They realized that she had endured their teasing without anger, without aggression, and that her strength was far greater than they had imagined. From that day forward, the dynamic at Jefferson High began to change. The bullies no longer approached her with aggression. Instead, they treated her with respect, some even seeking her advice or guidance in small matters. Jasmine found that her quiet strength had influenced more than just her interactions with them. Other students who had once ignored her or assumed she was weak began to see her in a new light. They admired her composure, her courage, and her ability to navigate challenges with grace. Jasmine continued her karate practice, refining her skills, but she also applied the lessons she had learned in the school environment. Focus, patience, and discipline were as valuable outside the dojo as they were on the mat. She became more aware of her surroundings, more confident in social interactions, and more capable of handling unexpected challenges. Her black belt was not just a symbol of physical ability. It was a reflection of mental strength and emotional resilience. At home, Jasmine shared the changes with her mother, who had watched her grow from a nervous new student into a confident young woman. "I can see how much stronger you've become," her mother said, smiling. "Not just physically, but in the way you handle yourself and others. I'm so proud of you." Jasmine smiled in return, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She had faced adversity, remained calm, and earned respect without compromising her values. Back at school, Jasmine noticed that her influence was expanding. Other students who had previously felt timid or overlooked began to emulate her calm and composed demeanor. Teachers also took note, recognizing her ability to handle difficult situations maturely. She had become a quiet leader, someone who could inspire through example rather than force. Her ability to stand firm, to maintain dignity and to treat others with fairness had created a ripple effect throughout the school. The bullies themselves had transformed. The boy who had been most aggressive began to speak with more humility and understanding. He occasionally sought Jasmine's guidance on handling conflicts, acknowledging that he had much to learn. The girls also softened their behavior, engaging in conversations with respect and curiosity rather than mockery. Jasmine realized that her actions had not only defended her own boundaries, but had also prompted a positive change in those who had once sought to harm her. One day, during a school assembly, Jasmine was recognized for her resilience and the way she had navigated challenges at Jefferson High. The principal spoke about the importance of respect, courage, and self-discipline, using Jasmine as an example. Students applauded, some standing to acknowledge her quietly. Jasmine felt a mix of pride and humility. She had not sought recognition, but she was grateful that her experience could inspire others. Throughout the remainder of the school year, Jasmine continued to grow. She built friendships based on mutual respect and shared interests. She participated in group projects, offering guidance and support, and she found that her calm presence encouraged collaboration and focus among her peers. The school environment, once dominated by intimidation and whispers, became more inclusive, with students treating each other with increased understanding and empathy. Jasmine also continued her karate training, understanding that the lessons learned on the mat, focus, discipline, and respect were integral to her everyday life. She began mentoring younger students, teaching them not just physical skills but also the importance of patience, confidence, and self-control. She realized that strength was about more than defending oneself. It was about setting an example and helping others develop their own resilience. By the end of the year, Jasmine had transformed not only her own experience, but also the culture around her. The bullies, once a source of fear, had learned respect and humility. Other students had learned the value of composure and courage. Teachers recognized the positive changes in classroom dynamics and social interactions. Jasmine's quiet strength had created a lasting impact, demonstrating that true power lies not in aggression but in control, discipline, and the ability to inspire others. Reflecting on her journey, Jasmine realized that every challenge she had faced had shaped her into a stronger, more confident individual. She had learned that patience, calmness, and focus could overcome fear and intimidation. She had discovered that her skills, both physical and mental, gave her the power to create positive change. And most importantly, she had learned that respect, earned through integrity and strength, was far more valuable than fear. Walking through the halls of Jefferson High one final time before summer break, Jasmine felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. She had faced adversity, navigated challenges with grace, and emerged stronger and more confident. Her experience had not only shaped her character but had also influenced those around her, turning a once intimidating environment into one where respect, courage, and understanding could flourish. Jasmine's journey had proven that true strength comes from within, and that by remaining calm, disciplined, and compassionate, one can overcome any obstacle and inspire positive change in the world around them.